Hi, welcome to the Louie File. I am so glad that you joined me today. Today I wanted to address a word, a term, a practice, if you will, that is throughout the scripture, goes all the way back to Abraham, and it's circumcision. Now, don't be afraid, I'm not going to get graphic in this video. But I do want to just touch on this subject matter because it is such a big deal, and I think it's very necessary to come to some understanding of what this is all really about. So, if you got a Bible and you want to look this up and you want to join me in this, I'm going to share a few passages, a few verses here, and I'm going to start in Colossians chapter 2. Excuse me. Colossians chapter 2. I'm going to start in verse 9 and read 9, 10, 11, and 12. 9 through 12. Colossians 2 verse 9, it says, "For in him all the fullness of deity, or the Godhead, dwells in bodily form. And in him you have been made complete. And he is the head over all rule and authority. And in him you were also circumcised with a circumcision made without hands, in the removal of the body of the sins of the flesh, by the circumcision of Christ, having been buried with him in baptism, in which you were also raised up with him through faith in the working of God who raised him from the dead." It's so great. So all that God is dwelt and dwells in Jesus Christ in bodily form, and if we're in him, then we are complete. We're whole. We are made whole, complete. So what is the deal with circumcision? It says, "In him you were circumcised, not with a circumcision made with hands, but in the removal of the body of the sins of the flesh." My Bible says the body of the flesh. The King James says the sins of the flesh. So what is going on here? All right. In the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, God gave Abraham this sign of the covenant. It's the circumcision, or the circumcising, should I say, of himself and all of the males in his camp. Whether they were born from him or if they were just tagging along for the ride, if they were slaves, any of that. And of course then later the law, what we tend to say law of Moses, adopted and adapted this, and they made it part of the law that anybody that doesn't have this sign, this circumcision, is cut off from God. In the New Testament, this becomes a very heated debate, a very big topic with specifically the Apostle Paul, but with all of the New Testament teachers, apostles, writers, authors. So it has to be addressed, and it has to be understood, or we can't move forward. You know, in the Galatian letter, the Apostle Paul fought against circumcising the Galatians because he says if you get circumcised, then you're going to have to obey the law of Moses, and then the sacrifice, the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ is of no importance, is no value. The Jewish people that had this tradition of circumcising their male children for hundreds and hundreds of years and saw it as God's command to them, had a really difficult time to say, we don't need to do this anymore. So when the Apostle Paul is presenting Christ and him crucified and saying that's enough, receive him, walk in faith by the Spirit, they were like, no, you need to be circumcised and obey the law of Moses. And Paul says, no. And so you just go round and round this mountain over and over again. So here in Colossians, Paul is clarifying. To me, it's very clarifying. He's saying that this circumcision that we've always thought of and known before, that was in the body with hands, somebody, a surgeon of type, some type of doctor or whatever it is, they cut away this flesh part of the male, and Paul's saying, no, we're talking about a different kind of circumcision here, and he says this is the circumcision in Christ. And this circumcision doesn't just remove some portion of physical flesh from a male body. This circumcision removes the body of sin, the sins of the flesh, removes the producer, if you will, of sin from your flesh. Whoa. So what exactly is going on? Let me show you a few verses here to reiterate some things. If you look with me way back in Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 16, you'll see a very impressive verse here. Now, I'm not saying that God didn't institute this or that it wasn't a right requirement for the old covenant keepers. What I'm saying though is God never intended that to be the whole point. There's always a picture, there's always a deeper spiritual meaning behind these things that God instituted for Israel. And here's an example right here. Deuteronomy 10 verse 16, he says, "So circumcise your heart and stiffen your neck no longer." So there you go. So he's giving us hints way back here. And then if you look now in Jeremiah 9, let's see here, Jeremiah 9, let's see if I can find it. Jeremiah 9, starting in verse 25. He says, "Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, that I will punish all who are circumcised and yet uncircumcised." Verse 26, "Egypt and Judah and Edom and the sons of Ammon and Moab and all those inhabiting the desert who clip the hair on their temples." Look at here. "For all the nations are uncircumcised, and all the house of Israel are uncircumcised of heart." So you see, just because someone is circumcised in their body, in the fleshy sense, that doesn't make them right with God. And neither does many other things. Eating or not eating pork, or not, certain food laws, that doesn't make you right with God. It can't. Keeping the Sabbath day holy, and I'll get into that with another video. But right now, let's stick to the circumcision aspect. So God all along wanted His people to have a circumcised heart, a cutting away of the fleshy heart. The very reason why sins are produced in humanity is because their heart needs to be circumcised. Now look with me real quickly here. We're going to look into some more verses here in Romans. Look at Romans 2. I'm going to read a few verses here. Romans 2, starting at verse 25. He says, "For indeed circumcision is of value if you practice the law. But if you are a transgressor of the law, your circumcision has become uncircumcision. So if the uncircumcised man keeps the requirements of the law, will not his uncircumcision be regarded as circumcision? And he who is physically uncircumcised, if he keeps the law, will he not judge you, who though having the letter of the law in circumcision are a transgressor of the law? For he is not a Jew." Watch this, verse 28, Romans 2:28. "For he is not a Jew who is one outwardly, nor is circumcision that which is outward in the flesh. But he is a Jew who is one inwardly, and circumcision is that which is of the heart by the Spirit, not by the letter, and his praise is not from men, but from God." So all along, God has always been pushing toward this heart problem that man has. Now, the problem is that in the fall of Adam, he unwittingly joined himself through the father of lies. The spirit of error took up residence within man, and his heart became darkened, and he became separated and distant from God and what God's intentions always were. So God has had to institute down through the ages His law. He had to give us the 10 Commandments. He had to give us the dietary laws. He had to give us the temple worship and the animal sacrifices, one thing after another. But He never meant to stop there. He always meant to get in here. And the only way to get in here was to come as Jesus Christ, God in the flesh, live the sinless life, go to the cross. And this is it right here. The real instrument of circumcision is the cross. The cross is the place where our fleshy heart is cut away. Back in Ezekiel, God promised that He was going to take our heart of stone out, give us a heart of flesh, and He was going to give us His Spirit, And He was going to move us to do what He would have for us to do from within, which is exactly what the new covenant is all about. In Hebrews 8, you can see where he talks about the new covenant. He said, this new covenant is, I'm going to write my laws in your heart and in your mind, and I'm going to move you. See, He's going to move us from within, from a new heart and a new mind, because the circumcision of our heart, the cutting away of the sinful flesh, the body of sin, is the dying of the old man and the separation of the old man, and God is no longer there. Now, when Adam disobeyed God, the spirit of error moved into humanity, and it just, so we're all born sinners. We're all born in the wrong union. We are in Adam, dead in our trespasses and sins, and we are ruled by the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. So Jesus, God Himself, as a man, went to the cross, and not only did He die for us, but He died as us. See, according to Romans 6, God's saying, we were crucified with Him, we were buried with Him, we were raised with Him to walk in new life. Let me read this verse for you. Romans 6:6 says, knowing this, that our old man, our old self, was crucified with Him in order that our body of sin might be done away with, so that we would no longer be slaves to sin. So that our body of sin, what? So that our body of sin, so the producer of sin, in the human is done away with. So what does that mean? Well, that means that our old union with our old sin master is no longer real. It's no longer there. We have been freed from the sin master. We have been cut off. We have been crucified with Christ. We have been baptized into Christ. We have been placed into Him by way of the cross, therefore cutting us off from the body of sin. It says in Romans 6, it says that he who has died is freed from sin. So that is the real circumcision. It's a circumcision of the heart. It's the process by which God kills off the old man with his old nature, and his love of sin, fleshy things, is buried. And we're raised to walk in new life. Wow. So that's what circumcision really boils down to. It's the circumcision of your heart, wherein you get a new identity and you have a new union to Mr. Righteousness Himself, Jesus Christ. So now you and He are one. He that is joined to the Lord is one spirit. All right. I hope this has helped you today. Watch the next, keep in touch with me for the next few videos. I'm probably going to talk about Sabbath keeping pretty soon, and touch on the dietary laws too. All right, I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for watching.